Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Highlighting Greatness with Fisayo. I'm excited to have this next guest on. She is someone that I've known now for a 15 years or
Yeah,
so when
give
we
or
first
take.
met.
Yeah.
Yeah, we met at UT some 15 plus years ago or so, and have kept in touch here and there over the years. But recently just reconnected and caught up a little bit, and I'm like, oh my God, I really need to get her on the podcast. I think she has an amazing story. Not I think, she does have an amazing story, her journey, and can't wait to get into it. Everyone, Wunmi Bakare,
Aw,
welcome.
thank you. That was such a really kind introduction. Is my story interesting? I would say it's been a roller coaster ride of ups and downs, but yeah, I think that's life, right? What makes life really amazing is that you're never really plateaued. You have peaks and then you have dips, and you kind of learn lessons as you go along. But I'm proud of you for making the transition from pharmacy to having your own podcast, and I'm incredibly honored that you deemed me worthy to be on this.
No, thank you
But
so
yeah, thank
much.
you for having me. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Again, we we met at UT. We weren't like super close there, but we were friends. We were in the midst of the same, like, we had some, friends in common. We were both part of ASA, this and that.
Mhm.
But definitely have seen a little bit of, your journey and your story played out over the years, mainly through Facebook and things like that. And I've reached out to you here and there just to say, hey, how's it going, this and that. And it's an honor to have you on, really. So why don't we start there? Why don't you start out telling the people, I guess, a little bit about yourself, um, your background, and childhood or whatever,
Okay.
just to give us more insight into you.
Okay. So, as you said, my name is Wumi. Um, I am a born and bred Lagosian. I'm Nigerian, born and bred in Lagos. Came to the US at, I think I had just turned 16 when I came to University of Texas at Austin for college. Straight out of
You
Q.
missed it, Wilmy. You missed it. Come on. You can't say it without throwing the horns up.
Oh, hook 'em horns. Sorry.
Hook
Sorry,
'em.
I didn't mean to miss that. Hook 'em horns all day,
Hook 'em
every day. I will forever
every
be
day.
Longhorn.
Bleed
But
orange.
yeah, so I came in 2004 for college. I was 16 at the time. I went to QC, which is a very known secondary school in Nigeria. It's one of the very competitive federal government colleges that's still really good. A couple of our friends, Kekbo, Tosin, they all went there. Dami Babatola. We were alums of that school. And so I think the transition from a really competitive secondary school to a very competitive university kind of made sense for us. Like the typical Nigerian, I was pre-med in college, freshman, sophomore, and a tinge, like my first semester of my junior year. And then unfortunately, I was diagnosed with sickle cell anemia, HBSS, which is the most severe type of sickle cell disease at 18 months. So when I came, I think from when I was a kid, my overall goal was always to find a cure for sickle cell, or at least get close to finding a cure. So that was kind of the fire, the fuel behind me wanting to do pre-med. But unfortunately, you are an alum of UT, so you know this firsthand. UT humbles you because you are competing with the best of the best, regardless of race, creed, sex. Everyone in there is the best and the brightest from the globe. So when you go there, if you go in thinking I'm a child prodigy, I'm incredibly smart, I think your freshman year is when you realize I thought I was smart, but I've met
Right.
people who can definitely top me in different realms. So I was pre-med, and then I kind of my disease and my career goals didn't align. I noticed that I was missing a lot of class. I would always be in hospital. I think I've always been very good at hiding, where even when I'm at my sickest or my weakest, a lot of people tend not to notice. So for the most part, in being pre-med, I loved it, but it got to a point where I was doing really poorly in school. And that was just because I couldn't keep up with everything I was trying to do. So my sophomore year of college, I started to struggle with my health. Amongst other things, I was also doing a lot of extracurricular activities. At the time, I was handling PR for ASA. I had a job with the Center for African and African American Studies. I was with the Black Students Advice. Like, I just had a lot on my plate, and everything coupled with my health, it just didn't work out. And I remember having that really difficult conversation with my mom and dad. And I remember it vividly because it was right before Christmas break. And I basically had that phone call and I was like, how else can I say this? I'm failing. And I don't know if I can continue as pre-med. And my academic advisor has called me from natural sciences asking that I transition to another college because my grades aren't sufficing, I guess, for the major I had chosen, which at the time was biology. And my dad, I literally think he was like, he froze in time because he didn't respond. But what my mom said that really stuck with me, and I always, in every interview I've done, every conversation I have, I say, oh, a lot of who I am now and the decision I made to my mom literally said, I'm not gonna lie to you, that's too much personality to hide behind a lab coat. And at the time, I didn't really necessarily understand what she meant. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And she's like, have you met you? She's like, as a kid, you've always been a phenomenal writer. I always saw you more in journalism. Like, even when you were a child, you'd be, hosting the troll pillows, because I was always a huge fan of like Oprah Winfrey. So I would watch Oprah, I would watch the Tyra Banks show, and I would be talking, like I would be literally talking to the troll pillows like they were like my guest audience. But it was just something I did as a kid. It's kind of like the way people pick up like a microphone and they sing or they play an instrument. So I just always thought it was a hobby. It couldn't be done professionally. And my mom was like, yeah, there's just so much personality to hide behind that white doctor's lab coat. So, and I was like, but, and I remember that, I remember this so well because I was in tears and I was like, but mom, like, where do I go from here? All I've ever known is biology, physics, and chemistry. Like, what else will I ever be good in? Like, what college am I even going to transition to? And she said, have you considered journalism? And I was like, journalism, from where to where? And my dad, typical Yoruba man, was like, good. I'm sorry, what? The goal for her was medicine, because my older brother is an electrical engineer, my dad's a civil engineer. And my mom was basically like, well, my dad made me do something. I wanted to be a teacher. And my dad was like, what are you going to do with that? And then I did an MBA. And am I doing anything with that now? Not necessarily. So I had to forfeit my dream to please my parents. And I don't want my child to make the same mistake. So let her, I think you'd be great at journalism. I think you're a natural writer. Take a class, see how you like it, and then we'll go from there. So that was easy because at the time, I didn't know what PR was. I hadn't heard of PR. All I knew was my mom said, take journalism. So as soon as I registered for journalism, it was almost like a recommendation to do like an intro to PR and then an intro to advertising. And I was like, I mean, I've always been good at branding. Like, I'm the kind of person I would walk into a store and I would critique each aisle. I would be like, well, this product placement, and I just did that naturally. It wasn't like I ever studied this. So I was like, well, if my mom thinks I'm a good writer, then I guess these other classes kind of follow along. That was kind of how I discovered PR. My very first PR class that semester, something really crazy happened where the professor that was supposed to teach it, his wife got ill. So instead, our vice president of public affairs for the University of Texas taught the class that semester. And that was how I got my very first job in PR. So till I graduated, I was a feature writer and editor for the entire university. So everything you saw on our website, I either wrote or I edited. So it's just interesting the way life pans out, because it was an intro to PR class. I knew no idea. I didn't know PR was born from marketing. If marketing, advertising, and journalism had a threesome, that would be PR in essence. So it literally, it played to my strengths of what I was naturally good at. I've always believed in the power of human connection, which is why I thought I would be incredibly gifted in the field of science, because I was like, I would be that doctor that has good bedside manner, because I genuinely love to get to know people. I'm super empathetic. But I think in trying my hand at PR and seeing that, like, I didn't need to study, I didn't need to cram, I didn't need to bend over backwards to succeed in this, I was like, Mom, I think you were onto something. And I remember my poor dad was like, okay, can you do PR and then like minor in biology? Like this, I don't understand how you're just gonna let two years of pre-med go down the dollars you can't get back. You know, and my mom was just kind of like, she'll figure it out. You know, she just, I don't know, it was weird, because now I'm grateful, but then I almost thought to myself, did she smoke something? How is she supporting this dream that came out of nowhere? But I think as a parent, you start noticing certain traits when your kids are really young, and it's a matter of like, do you cultivate those traits, or do you just say, no, do what I want you to do instead? So that was kind of how I got my start in PR, working for, I mean,
hold on, let me interject.
Sure.
Because there's a whole lot that
Yeah.
that we can there are a lot of little threads that we can pull on and ask a lot of questions from there. One, obviously, I was in the same, we walked the same shoes in a lot of these things, from being at UT together, being you're pre-med, I was pre-pharm biology. Like you said, it definitely humbles you, right? Coming in, you know, back in the day, there was this top 10% rule, that if you're in the top 10% of your high school class, if you're graduating high school class, you automatically got accepted into any Texas public school. And so I was top 10. I got into UT, you know, coming from where, you know, my little high school here in Houston, where, you know, I was one of the top 10 smart, quote unquote, people, but then you come here with people from all over the world, like you mentioned, right? Amazing, brilliant people, you know, and there's so much, you know, it's a whole new, like for me, even you came here from Nigeria, so I can't imagine the transition for you, but for me, even just from being here, leaving my parents' house in Houston and going off to Austin to live on my own for the first time in this city, this awesome school, got #1 party school that year, like all of this stuff. It was an entire different, you know, it's night and day, you know, and so you're in there with, and I remember, of course, you know, that struggle, because it just booms, smacks you.
Yeah.
It smacks you in the face, you know, because it's not a joke. You can't go in with the same things that for me got me through high school. Just, you know, glancing through whatever, some material, you know, a day before a test, some hours before a test, being able to memorize that and then go regurgitate it on a test. That wasn't good enough anymore, you know. And so, and then on top of that, being adventurous and, you know, partying and, you know, getting into different things and just having fun as a, you know, living your best life as a college student now, you know, going to games and 6th Street and all of that, you know, was, so I also failed and got D's in a lot of my classes. It's a humbling experience. I understand that very, very well. Whereas with you, you actually kind of have excuses as to maybe, you know, you were in hospitals, you were struggling, you know, you didn't have the, you know, you were struggling with health issues. I was struggling with adjusting more so. And so I understand that. And like I shared with you when we were talking about this yesterday, I also thought about switching into journalism because I'm like, well, what do I like to do? I like to talk, right? I like to talk to people. And I mean, whatever, here we are now, however many years later.
Yeah.
But I think it's awesome. So for those who don't understand the push as a Nigerian, and you made reference to this earlier, to go into what are our typical Nigerian
I think
occupations that our parents push us to?
Nigerian parents advocate for the sciences and not so much the arts. I think the only thing that I wouldn't even classify as in the realm of art is more commercial, which is if you do like a business degree or you do accounting or finance or investment banking or law.
Yeah. Right.
I think for them, their only definition of success is either medicine, pharmacy, engineering, you know what I mean? Petroleum engineering, civil engineering, electrical, mechanical. Yeah, if you do things like geology, questionable. If you do physics, okay, what are you going to do with that? If you do math, again, what are you going to do with that? So they push us in the direction of the sciences because there's a proven track record of when you do those really difficult degrees, you will never be broke. You might be in a lot of debt, student loan debt, but you won't be broke because for the most part, when you eventually kind of reach the peak of your career, you'd be making so much financially that as parents, they don't have to worry. So that's the mindset. But as children, it doesn't feel like that. Instead, it feels like you are in the passenger seat of your life and your career, and your parents are in the driver's seat for a lot of us. Just like you, I think for me, assimilation was the hardest because I'm struggling to adopt an accent that isn't naturally mine. I'm struggling to, at the time, I remember in UT, we were only 4% Black. So for the most part, you did that Black nod, but you couldn't really decipher, is this person African-American? Is this person from the Caribbean or Afro-Caribbean, or are they African? But we all kind of knew who the other person was. You might not know first name, last name, but there was that facial recognition of like, oh, I know who this person is. I know who they hang out with. So UT is, but the beauty of UT is that that is the one university that I've seen that every race had a fraternity and sorority. I have never seen any university, whether it be Yale, Princeton, Dartmouth, where you just see a fusion of cultures. We had Latino sororities and fraternities. We had Asian American, we had Indian, where I was just kind of like, everyone is represented here. But the beauty of that melting pot is it's also incredibly competitive. So for me, I know that because I'm Nigerian, I was raised to believe in this. And I've been saying this since as far back as I was taught to recite it, which is excuses are tools used by the incompetent.
Incompetent, who, yeah.
It's something that like even
and those that dwell in them shall amount to nothingness, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was just one of those things where like even with my health stuff, I wasn't conscious of the fact that that was a limitation. For me, it was always, I've had sickle cell and I've still been at the very best. So why is this any different? Even though I'm in a foreign country where I'm in a state where I know absolutely no one. You know, I didn't have when I came to college, I came on that flight by myself. My mom didn't come, my dad didn't come. When I went to the very first time I went to a grocery store, I remember I took a traveler's check because that's all my parents gave me from Nigeria. I didn't have a bank, I didn't have a debit card or a credit card. I didn't even know what that process was like. Everything was shell shock. But even with all of those things, I still didn't, I remember when I failed pre-med, and now today I can say this confidently, there were moments where I walked around with so much shame because even when I would run into people that like, we were in the same classes together and they're like, hey, I haven't seen you in a minute, where were you? There's the inner shame you feel of, wow, this person is kind of like I really thought, you know what I mean? Like we would be graduating together in this field. Now I'm having to add an extra year, which took, you know, my parents let me know that extra year was going to cost them more money. But at the same time, there was a lot of shame with that. So I think now I'm at a place, but I say all this because I know that there are so many people in their career who aren't fulfilled. And I think because we're both Nigerian, we understand this to a much deeper level. I have a cousin who is a fantastic entertainment blogger. He's been doing it since before Instagram and YouTube, when there was like the, you know, like popular African-American blogs like Nicole Bitchie. That was when he started blogging. But because his parents are doctors, they've always kind of advised. So he's always stayed on that narrow path. He's done consulting for PwC and like really big Fortune 500 companies. And now he got to a point where he was just kind of like, this cannot be my life. My life can't be every day I'm a copywriter, and I like every time I'm going to work, I'm like, Jesus, I hope this building will just burn down to the ground. But it doesn't happen. So it's hard. I would say it's hard to segue and switch majors. It sounds, when I tell the story now, it sounds cool, but experiencing it firsthand, there were a lot of tears.
I can relate to that, you know, feeling of shame, because like I shared with you, I was in a program at UT, Texas Interdisciplinary Plan or Program, whatever, where we were basically a bunch of students that were on the same track, whether it was pre-med, pre-farm. We had the same classes, and we were going to be taking the same classes each semester together, you know. And so after I failed, like I was behind. Now they are moving on, and these are, you know, it was a smaller knit kind of group. You know, for us, that I guess part of the purpose of it was so that we don't necessarily get so overwhelmed in the larger classes, or feel like we don't have the support structure in the larger 400 person plus classes that, you know, some others, you know, other students were having to take. And so it was supposed to create this kind of niche group where you're kind of, you know, all going together. And so not being able to continue with them, I definitely felt some type of way. I think what's amazing about your story, and what's on one hand is baffling because I know why, but then on the other hand, hearing that your mom was actually the one who encouraged you to get into journalism, and was able to say, hey, look, you can't, like, there's too much personality of you to just do this stock thing that we think you should go into, that, you know, for whatever reason, so, you know, society, right, has this pre-formulated thing for you, and I'm sure that's what you were trying to fit into, right? But the fact that it was also your mom, a parent, that gave you the strength and the idea and the kind of know-how to say, hey, you would be a great writer. You've always been, you know, dreaming of hosting a talk show, doing this, doing that, and you know. So I think that's amazing. I think that's absolutely amazing that she was able to do that for you, because you don't really hear that a lot.
No, you don't, especially among Nigerians.
Yeah, what you hear is the friction, right? The friction of, oh, what do you mean you don't want to do this? After we've spent all this money on you, blah 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 blah. Like, this is what you should do. Blah. Why don't you just go and try again? And so, kudos to your mom for that. Absolutely, I think that's amazing, because that, you know, that is something we don't see a lot. You know, parents that are able to say, hey, I think you would be good at this. I've seen you do this, or I've seen you from the time you were a child, and this is kind of how you naturally gravitate. You know, because even for me, pharmacy and all of this stuff is what I went into, because that was the expectation, but for the longest, growing up, my nickname as a child was Professor. Everyone would call me Professor. I'm like 6, and that's what people call me to this day. And now I'm seeing it because I do have a passion for teaching. I love to speak. I love to teach. And that's something that I want to get into later on, down the line. But they didn't. It's great that your mom was able to push you in the route that she saw your strength, and then you began flourishing. So from you talked about getting your first job, or how the professor that was supposed to teach this PR class wasn't able to, and so someone else stepped in.
Yeah, our vice president of public affairs taught the class at the time. But so PR for me is not a straight road, is what I always like to tell people as well.
It's not a straight what?
It's not a straight road, right? Yeah. So to get into our PR program at UT, I don't know if you know this, but we're top 5 in the country.
Oh wow!
Top 15 in the world. So
was it ranked that well at the
time? Yes.
Yeah.
Everyone in our advertising program either got if they got jobs with agencies, it was like Nike, Coca-Cola, brands that like are household names. They've been in the business for years. So
right.
Our advertising class, I remember that was kind of how me and Mustafa became. I don't know if you remember Mustafa. He was from Mali. He was an as well. But Mustafa and I were similar paths. We both started as science majors and then transitioned into the College of Communications. And we had this advertising class, advertising 318G, I can't forget it. In that class, if you don't make a B or better, you can't get into the College of Communications, especially if you're going for PR or advertising. You cannot get in. And it's one of those classes that I remember, he's a professor that for the rest of your life, you never get him out of your brain. That's how much he makes an imprint on your life. And the first day of class, he said, look around you. Right now in this class, you're about 260 students. By week 2, you will drop to about 130. And by week 4, you will drop to about 75. And when he said that, like everybody's looking at him like, how are people just gonna drop? Like, why are you saying this? And he said, I also wanna say this. On the days that things are due, things are due. You can turn it in ahead of time, but you can't turn it in late. If your mom dies 1 minute before the deadline, I do not care. If you have an accident or you are in a plane and it crashes and you survive 3rd-degree burns, I do not care. When he said that, at the time, it was so jarring and jolting that like everyone was like, this guy is crazy. And in his ranking, like everyone in the class was like, he's the one professor. If you miss a class, you might as well not take the test because you're going to fail. Because his classes were very descriptive, where he'll say on page 235, the advert on, like the bottom half of the page, what was the ad about? So you literally needed to have either a photographic memory or the ability to hear and store. So I remember the very first semester I took that class, we had our first project due, and just like sickle cell sickle cell is like that one invisible disability that shows up when you least expect it and don't need it. And I remember I was like stressed. I was like, I have to do this thing. I put all my talent into it. We had to make an ad for a product, a brand of cereal. Create your own brand of cereal, create the tagline, what you wanted to do, how you want to sell it, a brand ambassador, everything. I did it to the 9s. I think I worked on that thing till about 10 p.m. at night. It was due the next morning at 8. At 1 a.m., I woke up with a pain crisis, immediately got into a yellow cab, got rushed to the ER. At the ER, they're like trying to put oxygen. They're like, we're going to give you these pain medications. I was like, give me the 1 dose and hold everything because I don't want to fall asleep. I need to turn in this project. My crisis was so bad. I was having a blood exchange. So they were bleeding me out of one hand and putting in blood through another hand.
Wow.
My oncologist phoned my professor to say, I have my patient, she won't let us take care of her because she's so worried that she needs to turn in this thing. And my professor literally told my doctor on the phone, do not care. If she doesn't turn it in, tell her to drop my class. So my doctor is like, you need to report this professor. He's a CICK. He should be removed. And I'm looking at my hematologist like, oh, my life is so screwed. And I remember I got out of the hospital. I went to the teaching assistant and she's like, I'll be straight with you. If you've missed that first project, it's 15% of your total grade. That means you only have 5% to make between an 80 and an 85%. That means everything else going on for the rest of the semester, you damn near need to get like 98 to 100 to make that B. I would suggest you drop this class. And that was what I had to do. Because the truth of the matter was, based on how the very first test was, I quickly recognized I needed to bring a tape recorder to class because my brain didn't capture things as quickly as I needed it to be able to pass this guy's class. So I Q dropped it. A second semester, Fisayo, I took this class. I had, listen to the grade. I had a 79.45.
Oh.
Any human being, if you round up, a 79.45 is a 79.5. And if you round up, that's an 80. That's a B. I sent him an email and I basically said, I've spoken to the teaching assistant and asked her to regrade 2 of my projects so I can get bonus points that would take me to that 80. He sent me an email back and said, I'll see you next semester and then you can slay the devil. That was his response, his email response.
Oh my God.
He did not round up my 79.45.
Wow.
At the time, I didn't know the rule for the College of Communications was if you took that class more than twice, it just basically, in essence, what they're telling you is it means you're just not that bright. It's not for you. PR and advertising are just not for you. Wow. So you dropped it the first time, got a 79.4. And then he told me to come back and take it again. So I registered for the class. The day the class started, all of a sudden I noticed I was dropped. So I went to the College of Communication and I'm like, I need to see the dean. Like, I've registered for this class and it keeps dropping me out. And the lady is like, you've taken it twice. And I was like, no, I didn't. I took it the one time, but I Q dropped it. And she's like, well, a Q drop counts as you took it. But you drop it. So she's like, you've done your 2 tries. You can't do it again. Fisaya, when I tell you, I sat in front of this man's office on the ground in tears for an hour. He gets to the door, sees me crying, and is like, what is this? And I'm like, remember me? I was the one that emailed you. You told me to come back again and slay the devil. I'm here to slay the devil. They won't let me. And he's like, I'm like, the first time I Q dropped it, you remember my doctor called you because and he's like, oh, well, then you've missed your opportunities. Then good luck with whatever you decide to do with your life.